The stars had seen many empires rise and fall, but none like the Zephyrians. For 3,000 years their massive ships had crossed the dark space between worlds, bringing fear wherever they went. Their warships were not just big, they were huge beyond belief. Each one was like a floating city made of strange crystal that sparkled with deadly light. Commander Vextar stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, the biggest ship in their fleet. Through the wide windows, he could see a burning world below. The Kelrani people who lived there had tried to fight. They had failed, just like all the others. 6 billion lives had been lost in just 3 days of battle. The Zephyrians did not feel sorry for them. They never felt sorry. "The planet is secure, Commander," said one of his officers. The alien's voice was cold and flat like all Zephyrian voices. "All military forces have been destroyed. The survivors are ready for processing." Vextar nodded slowly. Processing meant slavery. The strongest Kelrani would work in mines on distant worlds. The smartest would become servants to Zephyrian nobles. The rest would simply disappear. This was how it always went. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Zephyrian technology was so advanced that it barely made any noise. Their computers could think faster than any living being. Their weapons could crack planets in half. Their shields had never been broken by any enemy. Other alien species had tried to fight the Zephyrians over the centuries. The proud Maltari had built great battle fleets. The clever Sindori had created new weapons. The brave Teklan had fought until every last soldier was dead. None of it mattered. The Zephyrians always won. They won because they were better at everything. Their ships were faster, their weapons hit harder, their defenses were stronger. Most important of all, their battle computers could see into the future. Well, not really the future, but close enough. The computers could study how an enemy moved and figure out what they would do next. Sometimes the computers were right days before the enemy even knew what they planned to do. This made fighting the Zephyrians impossible. How do you surprise someone who already knows your next move? How do you win when the enemy can see your attack coming before you make it? You don't win. You just die. "Sir," another officer called out, "we have received new orders from the High Command." Vextar turned to listen. The High Command was made up of the oldest and most powerful Zephyrians. They decided which worlds lived and which worlds burned. Their word was law across 17 galaxies. "We are to investigate reports of a new species in the Outer Rim," the officer continued. "Intelligence suggests they may have developed basic space travel." Vextar was not impressed. New species were found all the time. Most were still living in caves when the Zephyrians discovered them. The few that had reached the stars were usually easy to defeat. Technology alone was not enough to stop the Empire. "What is special about this species?" he asked. "They call themselves humans," the officer replied. "They live on a small blue planet called Earth. Our scouts visited their system 40 years ago but found nothing interesting. The species was primitive and divided. They were fighting wars with chemical explosives and metal projectiles." Vextar almost laughed. Chemical explosives? Metal projectiles? Such weapons were toys compared to Zephyrian plasma cannons and energy beams. These humans sounded like children playing with sticks. "Why are we wasting time with such creatures?" he asked. "Recent long-range sensors have detected unusual energy signatures from their system," the officer explained. "It appears they have developed faster than light travel. The High Command wants to investigate before they become a problem." Vextar understood. The Zephyrian Empire had learned long ago that it was better to crush potential enemies before they became actual threats. Even if these humans were weak now, they might become stronger later. Better to destroy them while they were still helpless. Set course for the human system, he ordered. Prepare the fleet for another easy victory, but far away, in the darkness between stars, something was moving. A single ship pushed through hyperspace toward an impossible destination. Its hull was scarred and patched. Its weapons looked simple and crude. By Zephyrian standards, it was barely worth calling a warship. The ship was called the USS Defiance. Its captain was a man named Jake Morrison, and he had spent years studying every bit of information about the Zephyrian Empire that humanity could find. He knew about their great fleets and terrible weapons. He knew about their victories over countless species. He knew that everyone said fighting them was hopeless. Jake Morrison didn't care what everyone said. On Earth, the governments of all nations had argued for months about what to do. Some wanted to hide and hoped the Zephyrians would never find them. Others wanted to surrender before any fighting started. A few brave voices had called for war, but they were shouted down by more sensible people. How could one small planet fight an empire that ruled 17 galaxies? Jake Morrison had volunteered to find out. The USS Defiance was Earth's newest and most advanced warship, built using technology stolen or traded from a dozen different alien species. It carried humanity's best weapons and their best crew. Most important of all, it carried something the Zephyrians had never faced before: human stubbornness. The Zephyrians had conquered through fear and superior technology. They expected their enemies to fight like civilized beings, following the normal rules of space warfare. They expected surrender when defeat was certain. They expected their victims to be reasonable. They had never met humans before. As the USS Defiance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zephyrian territory, Jake Morrison looked out at the stars and smiled. His crew of 800 men and women stood ready at their stations. They all knew this might be a one-way trip. They all knew the odds against them. They didn't care either. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were different. They were about to learn that some prey had teeth. Admiral Krell was eating his morning meal when the report arrived. He was a very old Zephyrian with crystal growths covering most of his dark blue skin. Those crystals showed his rank and power. The bigger and brighter they were, the more important he was. Krell crystals were very big and very bright. He had commanded fleets for over 800 years. In that time, he had destroyed more worlds than most Zephyrians could count. Entire species had gone extinct under his orders. He was feared across the galaxy, and he liked it that way. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we have a strange report from the Proxima system." Krell did not look up from his food. The Proxima system was nothing special, just a small star with a few rocky planets. His scouts had looked at it years ago and found only one world with life. The creatures there were primitive and weak. Not worth conquering. "What kind of strange report?" he asked. "A single alien vessel has appeared in the system, sir. It seems to have come from the third planet, the one with the primitive species." Now Krell was interested. He put down his eating utensil and looked at the officer. "Are you sure? Our intelligence said those creatures had barely learned to leave their planet." "Yes, sir. The ship appears to be using a basic faster-than-light drive. Very crude by our standards, but functional." Krell thought about this. It was unusual for a primitive species to develop space travel so quickly. The last report on these creatures was only 40 years old. That was a very short time for such a big change. "Show me the data," he ordered. The main screen lit up with sensor readings from the Proxima system. Krell studied the information carefully. The alien ship was small, only about 3 kilometers long. For comparison, his own flagship was over 50 kilometers from front to back. The alien vessel was made of simple metal and used chemical rockets for normal flight. Its faster-than-light drive looked like it had been copied from another species and built by someone who didn't really understand how it worked. Pathetic, he said with a laugh. Look at this thing. It's held together with metal welds and hope. What do these creatures call themselves again? Humans, sir. They live on a planet called Earth. Humans, Krell-1 repeated the strange word. Well, humans are about to learn their place in the universe. How many ships are in our current fleet? 300 vessels, Admiral. All fully armed and ready for battle. Krell-1 smiled, which was not a pleasant sight on a Zephyrian face. 300 of the most powerful warships ever built against one tiny human vessel. It would not even be a fair fight. It would be pest control. Meanwhile, aboard the USS Defiance, Captain Jake Morrison was looking at his own sensor readings. The Zephyrian fleet was massive. Each ship was bigger than anything humanity had ever built. Their weapons could probably destroy Earth's moon with a single shot. Captain, said Lieutenant Amy Collins, his tactical officer, I'm reading energy signatures from the alien fleet that are off our charts. Their power output is incredible. Jake nodded. He had expected this. Everything they knew about the Zephyrians said they had technology far beyond human science. But technology wasn't everything. Sometimes being smart was better than being strong. Any response to our communications? He asked. Nothing yet, sir, replied Tony Garcia, the communications officer. But I'm picking up scanning beams from multiple ships. They're studying us pretty carefully. Let them look, Jake said. Amy, are our special systems ready? Lieutenant Collins checked her displays. All systems are green, Captain. Chief Martinez says the modifications are working perfectly. The modifications were humanity's secret weapon. For the past 10 years, Earth's best scientists and engineers had studied every piece of alien technology they could find. Most of it was too advanced for humans to understand, but they had learned some interesting things. The most important discovery was about Zephyrian battle computers. The aliens were very proud of their ability to predict enemy actions. Their computers could analyze movement patterns, weapon signatures, and tactical decisions to figure out what an enemy would do next. It made them nearly impossible to surprise. Nearly impossible. But not completely impossible. Human engineers had found something the Zephyrians never expected. Their prediction programs worked by looking for patterns. They expected enemies to behave in logical, predictable ways. They expected military tactics that made sense. Humans had decided not to make sense. Bobby, Jake called to his chief engineer, over the ship's communication system. How are our chaos generators doing? Chief Engineer Bobby Martinez was deep in the ship's engine room, surrounded by machines that no Zephyrian had ever seen before. Some of the equipment looked human, some looked alien. Most looked like it had been put together by someone who was either very smart or completely crazy. Everything's running smooth, Captain, Bobby replied. The random number generators are online. The pattern scramblers are ready to go, and the surprise package is locked and loaded. The surprise package was Bobby's own invention. He had taken human engineering and mixed it with alien technology in ways that should not have worked. The result was something that broke several laws of physics and would probably give Zephyrian scientists nightmares. Excellent, Jake said. Lisa, what's our position? Navigator Lisa Wang checked her instruments. We're holding position at the edge of the system, Captain. The alien fleet is moving toward us. They'll be in weapons range in about 20 minutes. Good. Tony, any luck with communications? Tony Garcia had been trying to talk to the Zephyrians for over an hour. I'm getting something now, sir. It's a transmission in our language. The main screen flickered and Admiral Krell-1's face appeared. Even through the alien translation technology, his voice was cold and threatening. Primitive, human vessel, Krelwan said. You have entered territory claimed by the Zephyrian Empire. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Your species will be evaluated for processing. Resistance is futile and will result in the destruction of your world. Jake looked at the alien admiral for a long moment. He thought about Earth, with its blue oceans and green forests. He thought about the billions of people who were counting on him. He thought about all the other species the Zephyrians had enslaved or destroyed. Then he smiled. Admiral Krelwan, Jake said. My name is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force. I have a message for you and your empire. Speak quickly, human, my patience is limited. Jake's smile got bigger. The message is simple. If you want our planet, come and take it. Krelwan was so surprised he actually laughed. No one had spoken to him that way in centuries. Most species begged for mercy or tried to negotiate. This human was actually challenging him. As you wish, Krelwan said. Your death will serve as a lesson to your people. The transmission ended. Jake turned to his crew. Every face was watching him, waiting for orders. You all know why we're here, he said. Everyone said this was impossible. Everyone said we should surrender or hide. But we're humans and humans don't give up. Today we're going to show the galaxy what that means. The first shots came without warning. 300 Zephyrian warships opened fire at the same time, their plasma cannons lighting up space with deadly energy. The beams were beautiful in a terrible way, like lightning made of pure destruction. Each shot carried enough power to turn a mountain into dust. Admiral Krelwan watched from his flagship as the energy beams raced toward the tiny human vessel. He expected to see it disappear in a flash of light. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ship moved. It didn't just change direction like a normal starship. It twisted and spun through space like a fish swimming through water. The USS Defiance rolled and dived and turned in ways that made no sense. Most of the Zephyrian shots missed completely. The few that hit were absorbed by shields that flickered and sparked but somehow held. What is it doing? Demanded Subcommander Yexthala. Krelwan studied his tactical displays. The human ship's movements looked random and chaotic. There was no pattern, no logic to its flight path. His battle computers were trying to predict where it would go next, but they kept getting the wrong answer. Sir, reported Tactical Officer 6 Mura. Our prediction systems cannot lock onto the target. Its movement pattern is completely irregular. Krelwan frowned. This had never happened before. Zephyrian computers could predict the movements of any enemy. They had been programmed with the tactics of 1,000 different species, but these humans seemed to be ignoring every rule of space combat. Aboard the USS Defiance, Captain Jake Morrison was grinning like a madman. The ship bucked and rolled around him as it performed maneuvers that would have torn apart a normal vessel. But this wasn't a normal vessel. Human engineers had built it to be as unpredictable as possible. Pattern scramblers are working perfectly, Captain, reported Lieutenant Amy Collins. Their targeting systems can't get a lock on us. Good, Jake said. Bobby, how are our engines holding up? Deep in the engine room, Chief Engineer Bobby Martinez was watching displays that showed stress levels far beyond safe limits. The ship was being pushed harder than it was designed to go, but it was holding together. Barely. We're running hot, Captain, but she'll take it, Bobby replied. The random maneuvering system is eating up a lot of power, though. The random maneuvering system was one of humanity's cleverest tricks. Instead of following set battle patterns, the ship's computer threw dice to decide which way to turn next. Literally. There was a small chamber in the navigation system where actual dice rolled around, and their numbers determined the ship's flight path. It was crazy, but it worked. The Zephyrians could predict logical tactics, but they couldn't predict pure chance. "Lisa, take us closer to their fleet," Jake ordered. Navigator Lisa Wang looked at him like he was insane. "Closer, sir? We're barely surviving their long-range fire. If we get closer?" "Trust me," Jake said. "Amy, are our weapons ready?" Lieutenant Collins checked her weapons display. The USS Defiance carried armaments that looked primitive compared to Zephyrian plasma cannons. Most of them were just metal, rods with rocket engines attached. But appearances could be deceiving. "All railguns loaded and ready, Captain. Kinetic rounds are at maximum charge." Admiral Krell Wan watched in amazement as the human ship actually flew toward his fleet instead of running away. Either these creatures were braver than he had thought, or they were completely insane. "All ships increase firepower," he ordered. "Focus everything on that single target." The space around the USS Defiance became a storm of energy beams. Plasma, bolts, and particle beams filled every cubic meter around the small ship. Any normal vessel would have been destroyed instantly. But the Defiance kept dancing through the death storm, twisting and turning in its impossible random pattern. And then it fired back. The first kinetic round was just a tungsten rod about the size of a telephone pole. It had been accelerated to 90% of the speed of light by the ship's railgun system. To the Zephyrians, it looked harmless. Their sensors barely detected it as it flashed toward their fleet. The rod hit the dreadnought Cosmic Fury directly in its forward section. The Zephyrian shields, designed to stop energy weapons and exotic particles, offered no protection against simple metal moving at relativistic speeds. The tungsten rod punched through the shields like they weren't there, and kept going through the ship's crystal hull. The result was spectacular. The Cosmic Fury, a warship that had terrorized star systems for 500 years, simply exploded. One moment it was there, and the next, it was an expanding cloud of glowing debris. Silence fell over the Zephyrian fleet. In 3,000 years of conquest, they had never lost a ship to an enemy attack. Now one of their dreadnoughts was gone, destroyed by what looked like a primitive metal dart. "Impossible," whispered Krell Wan. "Run full analysis on their weapon." His science officer worked frantically at his console. "Sir, it appears to be a simple kinetic projectile. No energy signature, no exotic materials, just tungsten accelerated to extreme velocity." "How did it penetrate our shields?" "The shields are calibrated for energy weapons and particle beams. They were never designed to stop solid objects moving at such speeds." Krell Wan felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. These humans had found a weakness in Zephyrian defenses that no one else had ever discovered. Worse, they were using weapons so primitive that his people had never bothered to defend. Against them, the USS Defiance fired again. And again. Each shot was different. Some were tungsten rods like the first. Others were stranger. One round split into 100 smaller pieces just before impact, turning a single shot into a deadly swarm. Another round seemed to bend space around itself, creating a gravity weapon that crushed its target from the inside out. More Zephyrian ships died. The mighty dreadnought Eternal Victory was cut in half by a projectile that somehow passed through solid matter. The battlecruiser Star Destroyer was pulled apart by artificial gravity waves. The heavy cruiser Galaxy's End simply vanished when hit by something that folded space-time around it. "Sir," Tactical Officer Zixamura said, his voice shaking. "We've lost 12 ships. 12 ships in as many minutes." Krell Wan couldn't believe it. His massive fleet was being destroyed by a single small vessel using weapons that looked like toys. How were these humans doing this? The answer was simple, though the Admiral didn't understand it yet. Humanity had spent centuries fighting each other in endless wars. They had learned to be creative with weapons, to think of new ways to kill, to never accept that a defense was perfect. Most species developed energy weapons and force fields, and thought they had solved warfare forever. Humans had kept looking for better ways to break things. Captain Jake Morrison watched as another Zephyrian ship exploded on his main screen. His crew was working like a perfect machine, loading and firing as fast as the weapons could cycle. But he could see the strain on their faces. The random maneuvering was making everyone sick, and the ship was taking a beating from the alien. Return fire. Damage report, he called out. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, reported Damage Control Chief Carlos Rivera. We've lost main power to sections B and C. Life support is holding, but just barely. The USS Defiance was dying around them, but it was taking the Zephyrian fleet with it. Jake looked at his tactical display and saw that they had destroyed almost 50 enemy ships. It wasn't enough. There were still over 200 left, and his ship couldn't last much longer. Amy, he said to his tactical officer, how many of our special rounds do we have left? Lieutenant Collins checked her ammunition display. 17 tungsten penetrators, 8 gravity bombs, and 3 quantum tunneling devices. Jake nodded. Save the quantum rounds, we're going to need them for the flagship. Admiral Krell 1 was no longer sitting calmly in his command chair. He was standing, shouting orders, trying to find some way to stop the impossible human ship. His fleet was in chaos. Ships that had never been damaged in battle were exploding all around him. All vessels converge on the human ship, he ordered. Surround it. Don't let it escape. But surrounding the USS Defiance was like trying to catch smoke with a net. The ship slipped between his massive dreadnoughts like a minnow swimming between whales. Every time the Zephyrians thought they had it trapped, it would perform another impossible maneuver and slip away. And all the time it kept firing those terrible simple weapons that turned advanced starships into scrap metal. The battle had become something Krell 1 had never experienced before. For the first time in his long life, he was not sure his side would win. The USS Defiance was coming apart at the seams. Warning lights flashed red throughout the ship as systems failed one by one. The artificial gravity flickered on and off, making the crew float and then slam back down again. Smoke filled the corridors from damaged circuits. The smell of burning metal was everywhere, but the ship kept fighting. Captain Jake Morrison held onto his command chair as another Zephyrian plasma bolt struck their hull. The impact sent shock waves through the entire vessel, and he could feel the deck plates buckling under his feet. Hull integrity down to 30%, reported Damage Control Chief Carlos Rivera. We can't take much more of this, Captain. Jake looked at his tactical display. They had destroyed over 100 Zephyrian ships now, but there were still 200 left. His own vessel was barely holding together. They needed to do something different, something the aliens wouldn't expect. Amy, he said to his tactical officer. Target analysis on the flagship. Lieutenant Amy Collins worked at her console studying the massive Zephyrian command ship. The Eternal Dominion was a monster of crystal and metal, over 50 kilometers long and bristling with weapons. Its shields were the strongest in the enemy fleet. It's heavily armored, Captain, she reported. Multiple shield layers, redundant systems. Even our heaviest kinetic rounds might not get through. What about boarding? Jake asked. The bridge went quiet. Everyone stared at him like he had lost his mind. Board a Zephyrian flagship? It was suicide. The aliens would cut down any boarding party in seconds. Sir, said Commander Rick Thompson, who led the ship's Special Forces team. That's a big ship with thousands of crew members. We only have 200 Marines. Jake smiled grimly. Then, we better make sure they count. Rick, get your people ready. We're going to pay Admiral Krell 1 a personal visit. While the boarding party prepared, the battle continued to rage around them. The USS Defiance dodged and weaved through the Zephyrian fleet, its random flight pattern still confusing the alien computers. But the ship was slowing down. Too much damage, too much stress on the engines. Chief Engineer Bobby Martinez was performing miracles in the engine room, but even miracles had limits. Half the power conduits were burned out. The main reactor was running far beyond safe levels. The ship's structural supports were cracked in a dozen places. "Captain," he called over the communication system, "I can give you maybe 10 more minutes of full power. After that, we're going to be flying on fumes." "Understood," Jake replied. "That should be enough." Admiral Krelwan was watching his fleet die around him. The human ship was like a virus, spreading destruction wherever it went. His beautiful warships, each one a work of art as well as a weapon, were being reduced to scrap metal by primitive kinetic weapons. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving surrender requests from the other fleets." Krelwan turned, in surprise. "What?" "Long-range communications from our forces in the Vega and Centauri systems, sir. They're asking if they should retreat. Word of this battle has spread, and they're afraid the humans might have more ships." The Admiral's blood turned cold. If other Zephyrian fleets started retreating just because of one human vessel, the Empire's reputation would be destroyed. Fear was the foundation of their power. Once that fear was gone, every enslaved species in the galaxy would start thinking about rebellion. "Send a message to all fleets," he ordered. "Anyone who retreats will be executed for cowardice. We will destroy this human ship and show the galaxy that the Zephyrian Empire is still supreme." But even as he gave the order, Krelwan wondered if he was lying to himself. How could they be supreme when one small enemy ship had killed so many of his vessels? The answer came sooner than he expected. The USS Defiance suddenly changed course, heading directly toward the Eternal Dominion. Instead of trying to avoid the flagship, it was flying straight at it. "All weapons focus on that ship," Krelwan commanded. "Destroy it before it reaches us." Every gun on the flagship opened fire, the space between the two vessels filled with deadly energy. But somehow, impossibly, the human ship kept coming. Its shields were completely gone now, and parts of its hull were glowing red-hot from the impacts. But it didn't stop. At the last second, the USS Defiance fired its remaining quantum tunneling devices. The strange weapons passed right through the Zephyrian shields as if they weren't there and struck the flagship's hull. 3 small holes appeared in the crystal armor, barely big enough for a person to crawl through. Then the human ship rammed the Eternal Dominion. The impact was tremendous. The USS Defiance, traveling at nearly full speed, drove itself deep into the flagship's hull like a spear. Metal screamed against crystal as the smaller ship buried itself in the larger one's structure. For a moment, both ships were still. Then the USS Defiance's hull split open like a broken egg, and armed figures began pouring out. Commander Rick Thompson led the first wave of human Marines into the Zephyrian ship. He had trained for this moment his entire career, but nothing could have prepared him for the alien vessel's interior. The corridors were made of the same crystal material as the hull, and they glowed with their own inner light. The gravity was different too, making every step feel strange and awkward. "Move fast," he told his team through their helmet radios. "Find the command center and take it. We don't have much time." Behind him came Sergeant Kate Adams and her squad. Kate had fought in 3 different wars on Earth before joining the Space Force. She had seen urban combat, jungle warfare, and desert battles. But fighting inside an alien spaceship was something completely new. The first Zephyrians they met were not warriors. They were technicians and scientists who had never expected to fight for their lives aboard their own flagship. The human Marines moved through them like a storm, using weapons and tactics the aliens had never seen before. Zephyrian military doctrine was based on ship-to-ship combat. Their soldiers were trained to operate massive weapon systems and coordinate fleet movements. They had never learned to fight desperate humans in close-quarters battle. Dr. Helen Brooks, the ship's medical officer, had set up an emergency aid station in what remained of the USS Defiance's medical bay. Wounded Marines were already being brought back to her, some hurt badly by alien weapons, but she also had enemy prisoners to treat. The Zephyrian wounded looked at her with confusion and fear. They had probably never seen a human before, and they definitely hadn't expected one to be helping them instead of killing them. "Easy," she said to a young Zephyrian soldier who was clutching a burn wound. "I'm going to help you." The alien didn't understand her words, but he seemed to understand her tone. Helen worked quickly to treat his injuries using medical techniques that worked on both human and alien biology. Meanwhile, the Marines were fighting their way deeper into the flagship. Every corridor was a battle. Every room had to be cleared. The Zephyrians had superior numbers, but the humans had superior training and equipment designed specifically for boarding actions. Commander Thompson's team reached the command center first. The doors were massive slabs of crystal that should have been impossible to breach, but human engineers had planned for this too. Thompson attached a small device to the door and stood back. The shaped charge exploded inward, turning the crystal into deadly fragments that flew across the command center. The Zephyrian bridge crew dove for cover as the humans stormed in. Admiral Krell Wan found himself face to face with Captain Jake Morrison. The human captain looked small and fragile compared to the tall alien admiral, but there was something in his eyes that made Krell Wan step backward. "Admiral," Jake said calmly, "I think we need to talk." Around them, the battle for the ship continued. Human Marines held key sections while Zephyrian soldiers tried to retake them. But the outcome was no longer in doubt. The humans had achieved what no species had ever done before. They had boarded and captured a Zephyrian flagship. News of the iced area victory spread through subspace communications faster than light itself. On 1,000 worlds, enslaved peoples looked up at the stars and whispered a word they hadn't dared to speak in centuries: hope. The great Zephyrian Empire, rulers of 17 galaxies, had been challenged by a single human ship, and the humans had won. Revolution was coming to the stars, and it would not be stopped. Admiral Krell Wan stood in the ruins of his command center, looking at the human captain who had destroyed his fleet. Around them, the bridge was filled with smoke and debris from the fighting. Zephyrian officers lay wounded on the crystal floor, while human Marines kept their weapons ready. Captain Jake Morrison was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, and his uniform was torn and dirty. He looked like he had been through hell because he had, but his eyes were still sharp and determined. "How?" Krell Wan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How did you defeat us?" Jake wiped blood from his face and looked at the alien admiral. "You want to know the truth? You made one big mistake." "What mistake?" Krell Wan demanded. "We have the best technology in the galaxy. Our computers can predict any enemy move. Our weapons can destroy planets. Our shields have never been broken." "That's exactly the problem," Jake said. "You got so good at being strong that you forgot how to be smart. You relied on your computers to think for you. You expected every enemy to fight the same way. You never learned to adapt." Around the command center, other conversations were taking place. Sergeant Kate Adams was helping wounded Zephyrian soldiers while her own Marines secured the area. She had learned long ago that showing mercy to defeated enemies was not weakness. It was strength. One young Zephyrian officer looked up at her with confusion. "Why are you helping us? We would have killed all of you." Kate shrugged. "That's the difference between us and you. We fight to protect people, not to hurt them." Commander Rick Thompson was coordinating with the rest of the boarding teams throughout the massive flagship. His Marines had secured most of the important sections, but there were still pockets of resistance. "Alpha Team, report," he said into his radio. "Engineering section secured, sir," came the reply. "The aliens aren't putting up much of a fight. I think they're in shock." Thompson understood why. The Zephyrians had ruled the galaxy for so long that they couldn't imagine losing. The idea that a primitive species from a small planet could defeat them was so impossible that many of them simply couldn't accept it. But it was happening anyway. In the medical bay of the captured flagship, Dr. Helen Brooks was treating both human and alien wounded. She had set up a proper field hospital and was working to save lives regardless of what species they belonged to. A Zephyrian medical officer was helping her, though he seemed amazed by her techniques. "Your surgical methods are so different," he said through a translation device. "More gentle." "We learned long ago that healing is more important than hurting," Helen replied as she worked on a Marine with a plasma burn. "Maybe your people can learn that too." Back on the bridge, Admiral Krelwan was still trying to understand his defeat. "Your ship was so small," he said. "Your weapons looked primitive. How could you possibly have won?" Jake thought about how to explain it. "You see, Admiral, humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. Not against aliens, but against each other. We learned that sometimes the side with the best technology doesn't win. Sometimes the side that's willing to take the biggest risks wins. Sometimes the side that refuses to give up wins. But our computers predicted every move you could make." "Your computers predicted every logical move we could make," Jake corrected. "But we didn't make logical moves. We made crazy moves. Random moves. Moves that didn't make sense to anyone, including us sometimes." Krelwan was silent for a long moment. Then he asked the question that was really bothering him. "What happens now? Will you kill us all?" Jake shook his head. "No. We're not killers like you. We'll accept the surrender of any ship that wants to give up. The crews will be treated as prisoners of war and returned to their home worlds when this is over." "And if we refuse to surrender?" Jake's expression hardened. "Then we'll keep fighting until you change your mind. But I don't think that's going to be necessary." He was right. Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, ship after ship was sending surrender signals. The destruction of the flagship and the capture of their admiral had broken their will to fight. These were beings who had never tasted defeat, and they didn't know how to handle it. But the real victory was happening far away from the battle. On 1,000 worlds across 17 galaxies, enslaved peoples were receiving news of the human victory. The reports came through smuggled communications, rebel networks, and word of mouth. Each world heard the same incredible story. A single human ship had defeated the mighty Zephyrian fleet. On Kelros Prime, where 6 billion people had been enslaved, just days earlier, the survivors looked up at the night sky with new hope. The Zephyrian occupation forces were already receiving emergency orders to return to the core worlds. The Empire was pulling back its fleets to protect the heart of their territory. On Maltros, the descendants of the proud Maltari warriors began planning their rebellion. Their ancestors had died fighting the Zephyrians, but now they saw that victory was possible. On Sindor, the clever scientists who had once tried to create weapons to fight the Empire dusted off their old research. If humans could find ways to defeat Zephyrian technology, maybe they could too. Across the galaxy, the word spread like wildfire. The humans were coming. The Zephyrian Empire could be beaten. Freedom was possible. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the windows of the Zephyrian flagship, looking out at the stars. His own ship, the USS Defiance, was destroyed. Most of his crew was wounded. By any normal standard, it should have been a defeat. Instead, it was the greatest victory in human history. Lieutenant Amy Collins limped up beside him, her arm in a sling from the battle. Captain, we're getting reports from Earth. Command rescue ships are on the way. Good, Jake replied. What about the Zephyrian surrender? Formal surrender documents are being prepared. Admiral Krell-Wan has agreed to order all Zephyrian fleets to withdraw from occupied territories. The Empire is, well, it's falling apart. Jake nodded. He had expected this. The Zephyrian Empire had been built on fear and the belief that they were unbeatable. Once that belief was shattered, the whole structure would collapse. Sir, Amy continued, there's something else. We're receiving communication requests from dozens of alien species. They all want to talk to us. They want to know about Earth, about humans, about how we did this. Tell them we'll be happy to talk, Jake said. But first, we have wounded to care for and prisoners to process. The war might be over, but our work isn't done. 3 days later, the rescue ships from Earth arrived to find a scene that no one had expected. The Zephyrian fleet was intact, but surrendered, flying under human guard. The alien crews were being treated well, many of them working alongside human engineers to repair battle damage. Most surprising of all, former Zephyrian slaves were arriving from nearby systems. They had stolen ships, hijacked transports, and walked across space if necessary to reach the battle site. They all wanted to see the humans who had done the impossible. They wanted to say thank you. Admiral Sarah Mitchell, commander of the Earth Rescue Fleet, met with Captain Morrison aboard the captured Zephyrian flagship. She looked around at the crystal corridors and alien technology with wonder. Jake, she said, do you realize what you've done? The political situation across the galaxy has completely changed. 3 different species have already asked to form alliances with Earth. The old trade routes are opening up, and the Zephyrians are in complete chaos. Jake smiled tiredly. All we did was show people that bullies can be beaten if you're willing to stand up to them. It's more than that, Sarah replied. You've started something that can't be stopped. Revolution is spreading across 17 galaxies. The age of empires is ending. As if to prove her point, a communication came in from Earth. The president's voice crackled over the speakers. Captain Morrison, I want you to know that your actions have made every human proud. But more than that, you've given hope to billions of beings across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire is offering to negotiate a complete withdrawal from all occupied territories. They want to discuss terms for a permanent peace. Jake looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, people who had been slaves yesterday were free today. Children who had lived in fear were learning what hope meant. Entire species that had thought themselves doomed were making plans for the future. All because one ship full of humans had refused to give up. Tell the president we accept, Jake said. But the negotiations aren't just about us and the Zephyrians. Every species in the galaxy should have a voice in what comes next. And so began a new age in galactic history. The age of empires was ending, and the age of cooperation was beginning. It would not be easy, and there would be many challenges ahead. But for the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy had hope. The humans had kept their promise. They had come, and they had brought freedom with them.